In this video, I want to show you how to do long division with no remainder. So a couple of terms just in case you are tested on them. The underneath part is called the dividend. The part doing the dividing is called the divisor. So in case you need to know this, this is the dividend. This is the divisor. That's the number doing the dividing. And then the answer is always called the quotient. So it's important to know your terms in case they set it up as the dividend is this, the divisor is this, you know where to place it. All right, so let's get started on this question. So this question asks us to do 287 divided by 7. So knowing your multiplication tables really is critical to be able to divide. If you can't multiply, you're going to have a really hard time with dividing. So I strongly encourage you to memorize your multiplication tables if you have not already. So let's get started. What we're going to do is take the divisor, this number out here, and see if we can divide it into 2. Since 2 is smaller than 7, I can't divide into there, so I'm just going to put a 0 as a placeholder. I really don't have to write the 0, but just so that we keep our places in order, so we don't have anything in the 100s since 2 is smaller than 7. So we would go to the next part, and so now we're going to look at both of these numbers together. So I'm going to take 28, and I'm going to divide it by 7. So 28 divided by 7 is 4. 4 times 7 gives me 28, and then when I subtract, I get 0. So I'm going to bring down my next number, which is 7, and so then I'm going to see what would I multiply 7 by to get 7. In this case, it's just 1. I started off with a very basic one so you can get the concept. If there were a number at the end, there would be a remainder, and I will address that in another video. So the answer to this one is 41. So if you're asked what is 287 divided by 7, you can say that that is 41. All right, so let's look at the second example that I have here. It's a little bit tougher than the first one. It's always good to start with an easy one and then get into a little bit harder one. All right, so with this one, we're now dividing by the number 23. So when we're doing this, the first thing that you want to do is look at your values over here. So my first number is 4. Well, 4 is clearly smaller than 23, so I'm going to put a 0 at the top. All right, so now is where the tricky part goes into play. I'm looking at 23 into 41, so I always look at this first number here and the first number here to get me at least in the ballpark. Okay, so 2 goes into 4 2 times, so that's what I would start with. Sometimes you're going to start with this and this isn't going to be the correct number, and if you need to, you can always multiply off on another part of your paper and erase it. Eventually you get to the point where you can multiply in your head. So if I do 2 times 3, I get 6, 2 times 2 is 4, and I can see that 46 is bigger than 41. So that tells me that 2 won't work. So I'm going to go 1 less than that. So I'm going to just try 1 to make sure it's smaller. So if I do 1 times 23, I get 23, and that works. So 2 times 23 made it too big, and a lot of times you'll do this in your head, but just to show you the kind of process, that's why I wrote this over here. So I'm going to go ahead and erase it just so it doesn't confuse anybody later. All right, so if we subtract 41 minus 23, since the 1 is smaller than the 3, we have to borrow. So I'm going to do 11 minus 3, which is 8, and 3 minus 2, which is 1. Okay, so 18 is less than 23, which is what we want. So now what we want to do is we want to bring down the next number, the 4. Okay, so now we can see that we have 184, and 184 is definitely larger than 23, so we can divide into there. Again, I'm going to start with the first number. Well, 2 can't go into 1, so I'm going to look at this whole thing here. Okay, 9 times 2 would get me there, but if I do 9 times 3, and so again, I'm just going to show out what my process is. I would do this in my head, but again, when you're learning, sometimes you have to write it out. So 9 times 3 would give me 36, and if I add the 3 to the top up here, 9 times 2 is 18 plus 3 gives me 216, which gets me past 184, so I know that that's too much. So let's try the 8. And again, if you needed to, just write it out. Otherwise, what you can do, I'll do it in my head first, and then I'll write out the work just in case you need it. 8 times 3 would be 24, and then I would add the 2 up here. So 8 times 2 is 16, plus 2 would give me 18. So if you have trouble with doing it in your head because you're learning, then you can always take the 8 that we have and multiply it by 23. So 8 times 3 is the 24, carry the 2, 8 times 2 is 16, plus the 2 gives me 184. Okay, and if I subtract this, I can see, again, I do not have a remainder, so the answer to this one, or the quotient, is 18. As always, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know. If there are other topics that you need me to cover, please let me know that as well.